And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Hi, I'm National Weather Service Meteorologist Peter Chan with your Alaska Marine Weather Outlook on this Tuesday, May 7th, 2024. And we start out with the sea ice, and of interest is we have a small compact polar low that has passed through and south of St. Lawrence. It's got a pocket of colder air at the surface and aloft. And if anything, there's actually been some rare late season ice formation in some of the pack ice openings that have been here around the northern Bering Sea and along areas of the west coast, Bering Strait and around St. Lawrence. That feature is going to be sliding south-southeastward tonight and bring accumulating snow to St. Paul and St. George, where a winter weather advisory is in effect from late tonight through early afternoon on Wednesday. But otherwise, below normal temperatures are going to continue here along the west side of the state through mid-month. Looking at the current weather map later tonight and into tomorrow, here's that little compact low that's going to be swinging through the Pribilovs late tonight. And then we have one low that's going to be entering Prince William Sound during the day on Wednesday, and this front pushing onshore and through the Panhandle. So this is going to bring another round of coastal rains and lower elevation rains to the Gulf Coast and Panhandle, with snow higher up in the mountains. And we expect some gusty winds as well. And then by the time we get into Wednesday afternoon, that feature will begin to weaken. The front pushes inland and weakens. But here comes the next one. This is actually the wetter of the systems. This is a little stronger low is going to take a track northward and pass near or just east of Cape Suckling on Thursday. That's going to bring another round of actually some heavier rain to the northeastern Gulf Coast around Yakutat into the northern and central Panhandle during the day on Thursday. And with this system, there could be some gustier winds, gale force winds as we go through that period. And that little polar low will start to weaken and fill, but it's the remnants of it will ride up here along the western Gulf as we go through later Thursday night and Friday. And then the next low working its way through the western central Aleutians on Thursday, and that system will continue eastward as we go into Friday. So looking at the marine weather forecast here for the southeast Panhandle, winds will be south-southeast, inner channels will be 25 knots, gust of 40 knots there, Stevens Passage. Outer coast will see winds 20-25 knots, south-southwest. More easterly, though, to 30 knots there, Cape Suckling. Waves swells 10-11 feet. Thursday will be some stronger winds. We're anticipating, especially up there in the northeastern Gulf. We could see 20-knot southeast winds with gusts of 35 knots, Lynn Canal, 4-foot waves. Gust of 35 knots out of the southeast there. Stevens Passage, 4 5-foot waves possible. 15-knot southeast winds here around Ketchikan, Dixon Entrance. Strongest winds Thursday as you get north of Sitka. You could see some 35-knot gale force winds out of the southeast to east, with swells that way on the order of 12 to 15 feet. Along the northwestern Gulf, Prince William Sound areas, north winds Wednesday 10 knots, and waves a couple of feet there within the wider expanse of Prince William Sound. Northeast winds 10 knots, Upper Cook Inlet turning northwest to west 15 knots through Lower Cook Inlet. And on Thursday, we expect south winds 20-25 knots off of the Kenai Peninsula outside of Hinchinbrook Entrance. Southeast winds to 15 knots, 3-foot waves within Prince William Sound. And look for south-southeast winds to 25 knots off of Anchor Point down toward the entrance of Cook Inlet with waves of 4 to 6 feet. Across Kodiak Island, west winds of 20 knots on Thursday. Variable winds 10 to 20 knots through the central portion of the Alaska Peninsula, more southwest to 25 knots. Here's that circulation with that polar low bringing in the colder air, snow showers with it. That feature is going to swing through and come up like that as we go into Thursday. So as by the time we get into Thursday, we can see that feature is kind of washing out in this general area. South winds, Kodiak Island, 20 to 25 knots, 20 knots off of Chiknik out of the south. Back toward Bristol Bay, winds southeast to 20 knots, but in the wake of the system, winds are more southwest to west, 15 to 20 knots through the lower half of the Alaska Peninsula, and swells may be as high as 8 feet off of Sand Point and 10 feet there to the northwest of Cold Bay. The Aleutians on Wednesday, you can see the effects of that low going through the eastern Aleutians. We're looking at westerly winds 30 to 35 knots, and the eastern Aleutians falling off to west winds 20 to 25 knots. And then as we get out past Kiska, winds turn back to the south-southeast to 30 knots in advance of that next low way out past the western Aleutians. And then on Thursday, we start to see the effects of that next low as it works its way along the Aleutian chain and lower Bering Sea. Winds out ahead of it will be east-southeast to 30 knots, becoming more southerly through the central Aleutians, and then 30 knot southwest winds, Adak to Kiska, and then as the air, circulation wrapping in behind it, 35 knot gales between Shimei and Kiska, with swells as high as 12 to 16 feet there in the western Aleutians. Along the southwest coast, we expect winds to be generally out of the north-northwest 10 to 15 knots and northeasterly 20 knots at St. Matthew. North winds to 30 knots, though, vicinity of the Pribilofs, with swells as high as 10 feet there. North winds in the wider expanse of Norton Sound to 10 knots. For Thursday, look for easterly winds there to 20 knots in Bristol Bay, northeast winds to 15 knots out of Kuskokwim Bay, east winds to 20 knots, St. Paul, northeast winds there to 20 knots at St. Matthew, and then north to northwest winds around 15 knots out of Norton Sound to along the lower Yukon coast. And temperatures are going to remain chilly there, generally below freezing. And then going up through the Bering Strait, winds will be northerly 20 knots on the west side of the Seward Peninsula, becoming more northwesterly around Gamble. Up through the Chukchi Sea, look for winds to fall off, but remain with a northerly component to 10 knots there north of Point Lay through Utqiagvik, and then along the Arctic coast. Winds a bit lighter there for a change. North 10 to 5 knots there, Utqiagvik through Prudhoe Bay, westerly to 10 knots, Kaktovik. And then on Thursday, look for southwest to west winds 5 to 10 knots, say from around Dead Horse to Kaktovik, but northeast winds there only 5 knots, rather variable around Utqiagvik. But northerly winds down through the Chukchi Sea at about 15 knots, increasing to 20 knots through the Bering Strait and also on to the north side of St. Lawrence Island for Thursday.